Everyone argues about it, OLED or QLED. So we bought both, ran the same tests, and the results honestly surprised us. Here's the truth. What you see in the store isn't real. Retail lighting, vivid mode, and demo loops are tuned to make one technology look unbeatable, even if it doesn't perform that way once you bring it home. That's why we ran 12 real-world tests, brightness, contrast, gaming, reflections, burn-in, viewing angles, and more to find out which one actually wins in 2025. If your last TV looked incredible in the store but underwhelming at home, this is exactly why, and today, we're breaking down the real results of OLED versus QLED. The store floor flex. Walk into any big box store and the QLED always looks louder. That's by design. Those overhead fluorescents are pumping out around 1,000 lux of ambient light, and under that kind of glare, OLED panels look muted. Meanwhile, the QLED next to it is cranked to retail mode brightness maxed. Saturation dialed way up, motion smoothing locked in, and it's running a demo loop specifically engineered to show off punchy waterfalls and fireworks. Here's the thing. Those demo loops aren't random. They're shot in formats that favor high brightness and saturated color. The store staff has often set the picture to dynamic or vivid, which pushes contrast and color temperature into territory that would look garish at home but seems incredible under those spotlights. OLED, by comparison, is showing accurate color and true black levels that get completely washed out by the ceiling lights bouncing off every surface. The real kicker is that first impressions are engineered, not neutral. The TV that grabs your attention in the store is optimized for that exact environment, and that environment is nothing like your living room. Verdict. QLED wins in-store. Kill the overheads and it flips. Core tech differences. Let's talk about why that flip happens. OLED stands for Organic Light Emitting Diode. Every single pixel makes its own light. You want black, the pixel turns off. You want color, the pixel generates it. There's no backlight, no zones, no algorithms deciding what should be bright and what shouldn't. It's direct, per pixel control. QLED, which stands for Quantum Dot LED, though it's really an LCD with quantum dot color filters, works differently. You've got a backlight behind the panel, usually edge-lit or full array, and then you've got local dimming zones that turn groups of LEDs on or off. The quantum dots boost color volume, especially at high brightness levels, but the contrast ratio still depends on how well those dimming zones can isolate bright and dark areas in the same frame. Mini LED improves this massively by shrinking the LEDs and multiplying the zones. Some flagships have over 2,000 zones now, but there's still an algorithm making decisions about what to dim and what to keep bright. Get it wrong and you see blooming. Halos of light bleeding around bright objects on dark backgrounds. Here's where it gets interesting. OLED's per pixel approach gives you infinite contrast in theory, but the organic materials can't generate as much light as LEDs can. QLED's backlight can flood the entire screen with crazy high brightness, but it can't turn off individual pixels, so it's always trading off between blooming and shadow detail. Verdict. Context tie, each design has a ceiling. Now, contrast and black levels. This one's not even close in a dark room. OLED shuts pixels completely off. When you're watching a space movie and the screen cuts to a star field, those black areas are producing zero light. The stars are individual points of brightness against true nothingness. No glow, no halo, no compromise. QLED has to rely on local dimming. The best mini LED sets do an incredible job. We're talking about zones so small and so numerous that blooming is nearly invisible in most content. But stress test it with white text on a black background, or a game HUD with bright UI elements scattered across a dark scene, and you'll see it. Faint halos of light around each element, because the dimming zone has to light up a whole section to make that one object bright. We tested this with a cursor on a pitch black screen. On the OLED, it was a clean white dot. On the QLED, even the best mini LED flagship showed a subtle halo barely noticeable in motion, but there. The algorithm tried to keep up, dimming aggressively, but physics won. Here's the analogy. OLED is like a night sky full of individual stars. QLED is like city blocks that turn on and off really precise blocks if you spend the money, but blocks nonetheless. Verdict. OLED wins for true blacks. But what about raw brightness? Brightness and daylight visibility, QLED blasts OLED out of the water when it comes to full screen brightness. OLED panels can hit incredibly high peak brightness in small areas. We're talking 1,000 to 1,500 nits on a 10% window. But the moment you try to display a bright scene across the entire screen, automatic brightness limiting kicks in. ABL is the OLED's self-protection mechanism. The panel can't sustain high power draw across all pixels without overheating or risking accelerated wear, so it dims the whole image when average picture level climbs. QLED doesn't have that problem. The backlight can pump out 1,500, 2,000, even 2,500 nits across 100% of the screen. Watching daytime sports, a bright football field, a sunlit tennis court, the QLED stays punchy and consistent. The OLED looks good, but it can't match that sustained full field output, especially if the room has windows. We tested this with high APL content, bright skiing footage, daytime news broadcasts, white UI screens. The QLED held its brightness, the OLED dimmed noticeably. In a dark theater room, you won't care. In a living room at 2 in the afternoon with light pouring in, the difference is real. Think of it like this. QLED is a flashlight flooding the room. OLED is a focused spark that nails the highlights but can't light up everything at once. Verdict. QLED wins for daytime visibility. Okay, color and HDR tone mapping. color performance and HDR tone mapping. Color volume is where quantum dots flex. QLED panels, thanks to those quantum dot filters, can produce incredibly saturated colors even at very high brightness levels. If you're watching a sunset scene in HDR and the sky is pushing 1000 nits, the QLED maintains rich, saturated oranges and reds. OLED can produce beautiful color too, but at lower overall brightness, so the color volume, the combination of brightness and saturation, isn't as high. And get this, when we tested EOTF tracking and tone mapping behavior, both technologies behave differently depending on the scene. QLED flagships tend to roll off highlights more gradually, preserving detail in super bright areas. OLED, with its lower peak brightness, sometimes clips highlights sooner, unless the tone mapping algorithm compensates by dimming the midtones to preserve the peaks. In practice, this means bright scenes favor QLED's color volume and highlight detail. Mixed scenes and darker content favor OLED's contrast and the way colors pop against true black. The room you're in and the picture settings you choose make a massive difference here. Verdict: narrow tie room and content decide. Gamers, your turn. Motion and gaming response OLED's pixel response time is near instant. We're talking sub 1 millisecond. That means when the image changes, the pixels change state immediately, with almost zero blur or trailing. For fast-paced gaming, first-person shooters, racing sims, competitive multiplayer, that clarity is unmatched. QLED panels, even at 120 or 144 Hz, have slower pixel transitions because liquid crystals need time to change state. The best ones get down to 2 to 5 milliseconds, which is still excellent, but it's not instant. You can see the difference in high-speed motion. A camera pan across a detailed scene, or a car racing across the screen, looks crisper on OLED. Here's the trade-off. OLED's sample and hold display can show 24 frames per second stutter more prominently, since each frame is held perfectly sharp. QLED's slight motion blur can mask that stutter. Both support VRR, ALLM, and black frame insertion if you want it, but for pure motion clarity and low input lag, OLED hits different. The analogy: OLED is a track-tuned coupe precision, response, agility. QLED is a power SUV, fast, capable, but not as sharp in the corners. Verdict: OLED wins for motion clarity, situational tie if you need extreme HDR brightness in bright room gaming. And if you're finding this breakdown useful, hit the like button. It really helps the channel cut through the noise. Now, where you sit. Viewing angles OLED keeps its color and contrast no matter where you sit. Move 30 degrees off axis, 45 degrees. Even more, the image stays consistent. Colors don't shift, blacks stay black, contrast holds. QLED is a different story, and it depends on the panel type. Most QLEDs use VA panels for better contrast, but VA has a major weakness: viewing angles. Sit off center, and colors wash out, contrast drops, and the image takes on a grayish cast. Some brands use IPS-type LCD panels instead, which have much better viewing angles, but those sacrifice native contrast blacks, look more like dark gray even head-on. We tested this with a sofa setup, 3 people sitting across a sectional, all watching the same movie. On the OLED, everyone saw the same image. On the VA-based QLED, the person on the far end saw noticeably faded colors and lifted blacks. The IPS-based QLED kept the colors consistent, but couldn't match the OLED's black levels from any angle. Bottom line, if you've got a wide seating arrangement or an open-plan living room where people watch from different spots, OLED or an IPS-type QLED gives you the best experience. Verdict: OLED wins for most living rooms. The scary topic: burn-in. Burn-in and longevity. Let's get real about burn-in. OLED panels can retain images if you abuse them. Static HUDs, news tickers, channel logos. If you leave them on screen at high brightness for hours every single day, you risk permanent image retention. The organic materials that make OLED pixels glow do degrade over time, and uneven wear shows up as ghost images. But here's the context. Modern OLEDs have pixel shift, logo, dimming, screensavers, and automatic refresh cycles built in. Warranties now often cover burn-in. Real-world owner surveys show that mixed content viewers, people who watch movies, play different games, stream varied shows, rarely see issues even after 5+ years. It's the edge cases that get hit. Someone running CNBC 12 hours a day, or playing the same game with the same UI for thousands of hours. QLED has no burn-in risk. The backlight and LCD layers don't suffer from that kind of permanent degradation. You can run static content forever. That said, QLEDs can develop their own aging issues. Backlight uniformity drift, slight color shift over many years, occasional stuck or dead pixels. Verdict: QLED wins on worst-case risk. OLED is safe enough for most viewers with normal mixed use. If this is already saving you from a headache, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's next. Glare and reflections next. Reflections and glare handling. Glossy OLED screens have incredible perceived contrast because the coating doesn't scatter light, but if you've got a window behind you or a lamp in the room, you'll see reflections. They're sharp and visible. Newer matte OLED panels solve this by adding a diffusion layer that scatters reflections, killing glare almost entirely. The trade-off? Slightly raised black levels and a subtle loss in perceived sharpness, though most people don't notice unless they're comparing side by side. QLED panels vary wildly. Some have excellent anti-reflective coatings that rival matte OLED. Others have semi-gloss finishes that split the difference. And because QLEDs can push so much brightness, they can often overpower ambient light. Even with some glare present, you're fighting reflection with raw nits. We tested this with a floor lamp behind the viewer. The glossy OLED showed a clear reflection. The matte OLED diffused it into near invisibility. The QLED with a good AR coating performed similarly to the matte OLED, and its extra brightness helped the image pop through the remaining glare. Verdict: tie pick by room and coating. Window-heavy setups benefit from matte OLED or bright QLED with solid AR. Let's match tech to habits. Lifestyle fit movies versus sports. If you watch movies at night, OLED is hard to beat. Those perfect blacks, zero blooming around subtitles, the way shadow detail holds without crushing, it's cinematic. You're seeing the image as close to the director's intent as consumer displays get. If you watch sports during the day, QLED makes more sense. A bright football field, a sunlit baseball diamond, fast-paced hockey on white ice, QLED's full field brightness and lack of ABL keep the image punchy and consistent. There's no dimming when the camera pans across a bright crowd. And because there's no burn-in risk, you can leave the game on for hours with the score ticker in the corner and not worry. News and daytime TV? Same story. QLED handles high brightness content better, and you're not risking static logos. Verdict: OLED for darkroom movies and story-driven gaming. QLED for daytime sports, news, and bright room viewing. Okay, what should you actually shortlist? Best 2025 picks by use case. Here's your shortlist strategy. If your room has glare problems, big windows, lots of ambient light, look at matte OLED options. They kill reflections better than any coating we've tested, though you should verify gamma and shadow detail performance because the matte layer can slightly affect those. If you need peak brightness and want to minimize blooming, go for high-zone mini-LED flagships. We're talking about models with over 1,000 zones and advanced dimming algorithms. These deliver searing HDR highlights with disciplined control, and the best ones come close to OLED-level black floors and dark scenes. If you're prioritizing darkroom cinema and gaming, WOLED or QD-OLED flagships are your targets. WOLED uses white subpixels with color filters. QD-OLED combines quantum dots with OLED emitters for better color volume and brightness than traditional WOLED. Both give you that infinite contrast and near-instant response. The real takeaway: buy by room, coating, and dimming quality, not by badge. Final scoreboard. Overall winner in buying advice. Here's the summary. OLED wins for cinematic nights, off-axis seating, and motion clarity. If your priority is picture quality in a controlled environment, dark room, varied content, wide seating, OLED dominates. The contrast, the blacks, the response time, the viewing angles, these categories matter for immersive viewing, and OLED sweeps them. QLED and mini-LED win for bright rooms, all-day sports and news, and zero burn-in anxiety. If your TV lives in a sun-soaked space, if you watch a lot of high-brightness content, if you need the peace of mind that comes with no image retention risk, QLED is the smarter pick. Matte OLED bridges the glare gap. It's not perfect, there's a slight trade-off in black level and sharpness, but it makes OLED viable in rooms where glossy panels would struggle. Overall, OLED is the winner for picture quality. QLED and mini-LED are the winners for environmental flexibility. The best TV for you depends on your room and your habits. Match the technology to the space. Big stores don't sell you the truth, they sell you a feeling under loud lights. Their QLED looks untouchable, ultra bright, super punchy, perfectly tuned demos. At home, lighting is softer, content is mixed, and settings aren't locked to retail mode. That's where the real winners show. Across 12 sections, OLED consistently dominated the categories that matter at night and for movies and gaming. True blacks, zero blooming, off-axis consistency, and instant motion. QLED and mini-LED struck back on full-screen brightness, daytime visibility, and zero burn-in stress, and matte OLEDs now erase a lot of the reflection. Problem: the lesson's simple. The best TV isn't the one that looks brightest in store, it's the one that fits your room and your habits. Quick map, cinematic nights, story games, wide seating, go OLED. Sunny living rooms, all-day sports, news tickers, go high-zone mini-LED or matte OLED. On the fence? Match screen coating and local dimming quality to your space before chasing brand names. Let me know in the comments which test result surprised you the most, OLED or QLED, and if you want to make smarter tech choices, subscribe and hit the bell. I'll see you in the next one.